It's for kids. This comment has come up so often, and each time I never respond to it for several reasons. Number one, if they're asking why I care about a show for kids, then why the hell do they care about a guy talking about a show for kids? Unless they too care about the show for kids. But back to the topic at hand. For so long, people who brought up this topic, I've responded to it with nothing but silence, because in most cases, it's not a comment that deserves a response. These kind of people don't belong on my channel. And it's not that I don't think that they'll ever come around, it's because it's just for kids isn't an argument. It's flimsy at best. It boils down to, this is supposed to be bad. You're wrong for wanting it to be good. It's not even an excuse for an argument. I disagree with you, but I've got nothing to say. What it is a mentality. You don't change a mentality by coming up with reasons or any of that bullshit, because it's only a bridge that they can cross themselves, or be left behind, as everyone else does. I could show these people that children's entertainment has the same scale quality that adult entertainment does a million different times, and could show the great things that it can do. But that never works. I don't know. Maybe it's because Courage the Cowardly Dog or Hey Arnold were much more widely seen across the age groups. Alright, fair enough. Let's do a show that specifically aims at kids. Arthur. If kids' shows couldn't be critiqued, then I could not say that Arthur is one of the greatest children's shows ever made. It really is. My Arthur's Big Hit review did not do the show justice. It has its duds, but currently in its 17th season, it's bound to happen here and there. Most of its greatness comes from the morals it teaches and how it tries to teach them. Although a good kids show doesn't need to teach morals, it just needs to do a thing and do that thing really well. Most kids shows teach simple morals like stealing is wrong, don't skip class, or that we should prevent overpopulation. Oh, I'll get to you. Arthur teaches morals about dealing with cancer, dyslexia, Asperger's syndrome, and in this episode's case, dealing with 9/11 trauma, when it's not making homages to Batman the Animated Series. Why did you never hear of anyone getting angry about their kids being exposed to, I don't know, reality? That's because they did these things so well that there really was nothing to complain about. So, let's talk about this episode. First of all, it's not directly about the events of September 11, 2001. The World Trade Center isn't mentioned, nor is specifically what happened. That's because this episode is by and large an allegory, and it puts things on a smaller scale to make them more relatable to the target audience. Not only that, but it does help this episode from getting dated. This generation will have the same reaction to this episode as the generation that grew up around the time of the tragedy, and the generation before it would have the exact same reaction as well. So yes, they did most likely have a reason for not name-dropping specific events. And if you're thinking this episode is about a generic fire breaking out, the date April 9th is kind of an arc number for this episode. Another reason that's done is because Arthur understands something very key. The difference between dumbing something down for children and making something relatable for children. Dumbing something down would remove any complexities and present the issue at hand as very black and white. It's the easy way out and the lazy way out. People think that it would be easier for kids to understand, but that comes with the risk of giving people a very skewed perspective on the issue at hand. Yes, I take this shit seriously for a reason. With a situation as complex as dealing with a tragedy, you can't do it with one character no matter who you're writing for. And that's why this episode goes through 4 interlocking stories, each dealing with a different side of the issue. The episode starts with Sue Ellen narrating that she got a postcard from her pen pal.
And it was a beautiful day. I remember that, too. Just a beautiful, normal day in early spring. Who would have thought that this day would change so many people?
We see that Arthur's father has to cater a breakfast at his school. In fact, we see everyone going on about what seems to be a very typical day. And yeah, that's kinda how people remember tragedies. They tend to remember what happened before to the most minute details, even if it's the same typical thing that they've done each and every day. We see that Buster, however, slept in because he didn't hear his alarm clock. It continues to be a typical day until Mr. Ratburn starts smelling smoke. Suddenly, a fire alarm starts going off. Sue Ellen is forced to leave something behind, and we see that there's actual smoke and fire and stuff. Binky sees it too. He even sees that a teacher injured his leg, and it's all clearly affecting Binky. And Arthur's dad is still in the building, which is not very good. We also see that Sue Ellen's journal is completely destroyed by the fire, and the water attempting to put it out. And Arthur's father is safe. Finally, Buster comes along, having missed the entire thing. Each of these details is important, and it sets its course to deal with an emotion someone might be having in the aftermath of a tragedy. Binky is thoroughly affected by the fear of being close to a fire, but he doesn't want to let it show. Arthur deals with the fear of thinking that someone they cared about was in significant danger. Sue Ellen deals with the loss of something very important. And yes, I know there's a large difference between losing something like a journal and losing an actual relative, but it allows them to get across the emotions and attitude that someone might be experiencing. As for Buster, he's unable to relate to the situation because he wasn't there, which is a perspective that's far too often ignored in stories like this and in reality. But here, it's treated as just as valid as the others, because it is just as valid of a reaction to have. As the story goes on, we see how affected each person is. Binky is practically traumatized and runs in fear at the mention of a fire. Muffy tries to buy Sue Ellen another journal, but like losing a computer, it's about the contents that were in it. And like losing a memento, it's about the memories that surrounded it, not the physical object. She rejects the new journal. Meanwhile, Buster is telling dramatic stories about the fire, even though he wasn't there. It's quite clear that Buster almost wishes he was there, because like I said, he can't relate otherwise. And there's sort of a bizarre feeling of being left out. His retelling of the events comes across as offensive to Arnold, who felt that he could have lost someone there. Yeah, you don't need to blurt out your morals for them to be there. Buster feels very self-conscious about not feeling anything, and Arthur is worried about his father's next catering job. This time it's at an aquarium. He's relieved to hear that because there's very little chance of an aquarium that's going to burst into flames. However, in his dreams, other forms of danger become apparent. Meanwhile, Buster has to see Mr. Morris at the hospital. From this, Buster starts to learn about Mr. Morris, and he's a very nice guy. Also a very interesting guy too. Everything seems to be going on nice and happily until someone pulls the fire alarm at the temporary school that Arthur and his friends have been going to. It soon turns out that it's a false alarm. Buster is still disappointed that he can't experience something like that firsthand. And once again, Arthur calls him out for it. You see, it's very smart what they did here. At no point is Buster an asshole. He's just naive, and the episode treats him as such. They learn that someone pulled the fire alarm, and we see that it's Binky. Yeah, he is in a lot of trouble. Even after he says an apology and explains what he did was dumb and dangerous, the principal sends him to the school counselor. He's also got to do some community service. And the counselor happens to be a former volunteer firefighter. Even he admits that being around a fire can be frightening. Buster begins spending time with Mr. Morris, and learns that he's really into aliens. Once again, it's a really clever thing that they're doing here. They're trying to humanize Mr. Morris, who was the victim of this event. Soon enough, it's April 16th and Arthur's father has to go do his next job. Arthur is aware of this and tries to fake being sick, and he makes it fairly obvious that he's worried about his father. Arthur's dad tries to ease the worry by telling him one of his own experiences.
Do you know that when I was your age, Grandma Thora was in a car accident? She wasn't hurt, but for weeks afterwards, I was worried whenever she set foot in a car. Even when she just went to the store for a bottle of milk, I was afraid she'd be in another car accident. While I was waiting for her to return, I'd shoot crumpled up balls of paper into the wastebasket, and I told myself that if I made more baskets than I missed, she would come home safely. It seemed to work. Now, of course, I was a pretty good shot. Then one day, I forgot to do it. She was gone for 3 hours, and I didn't shoot one basket. And you know what happened?
What?
She came home just fine. It's my job to worry about you, Arthur, not the other way around.
Sue Ellen, not really getting into her new journal, decides to start painting a mural about the event. Binky, however, is still thoroughly affected by the situation, and he learns that the best way to deal with the fears is to talk about them. Finally, we learn that Mr. Morris is retiring. Buster comes to visit him after school, and we learn that he's moving in with his daughter at New Mexico. He gives Buster an accordion. Later, we see that Arthur is still worried about his dad, considering that it's past 9:30 at night. However, it seems that he's managing to get past his worrying. A very complex issue is made extremely relatable to kids, and at no point were the emotions or anything about the scenario dumbed down. At no point was his audience talked down to. You want to think that these are just simple kid shows? Fine. You want to think that these shows could be just for kids and only viewable by kids? Fine. The medium's moving on without you, jackass.
Every day when you're walking down the street, everybody that you meet has an original point of view. And I say, hey, what a wonderful kind of day. If you could learn to work and play and get along with each other. You got to listen to your heart, listen to the beat, listen to the rhythm of the street. Open up your eyes, open up your ears, get together and make things better by working together. It's a simple